All right, we should be up and ready to record. All right, I'm going to start now, Kirk, if you're happy to start.
So,
Amazing. So, welcome everyone to the Sensei Ask an Expert webinar for May 2025. Today, our topic is the Benefit Blueprint, a practical guide to maximize and showcase portfolio value. Next, please, Kirk. So just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. If you could please remain on mute throughout the presentation, that would be amazing. If you did have a question, however, use the raise your hand tool or a chat function. We'll get to you there. This session is also being recorded and will be sent out to you afterwards. And there'll be a Q&A session right at the end as well. All right, thanks, Kirk. So today we have Kirk McVean for our panel. So I'll pass you over to Kirk for a little introduction. Thanks, Kirk.
all right, thanks, Ellie, and a big thank you for everybody who's joined the session today. Really hope to provide you some value for your time. So, yeah, just to quickly introduce myself. So, I'm a PPM consultant here at Sensei, and we've got the honor of helping customers uplift their PPM maturity. We talk to customers about benefits management and things like this every day. So, we'd love to meet with you and talk about your organization and provide some thoughts. Just reach out to us if you're interested. We also have a product called Altus, which you might be aware of, which is a PPM solution. It's pretty cool. Take a look at our website if you're interested in that. Don't worry if you aren't an Altus user at the moment. The presentation today is just it's system agnostic. But of course, if you do use Altus, everything we talk about today, we can do through the system as well. So prior to Sensei, I've been, if I'm being honest with you, I've been a little bit obsessed with benefits management for about 15 years. I think my wife thinks I'm a little bit crazy, but I think the area is really interesting. It's one of those areas that, in my experience in sort of the working world, but also as a consultant, where companies generally have sort of a lower maturity. It's difficult to do it well. I had the opportunity prior to Sensei. I was brought into an ASX 200 company to help establish a portfolio. And I think this will sound familiar to many of you on the call. Going into that initially, it really was a bit of a Wild West. So there were many different business units running projects. They were very disconnected. There was no central visibility of what the projects were. The governance was really inconsistent, and there were shootouts for resources. So it was a bit of a wild scene. And I was really fortunate. We had a great team. We worked pretty hard, and we were able to put that into a portfolio and a PMO and have standards, all the good stuff that you'd imagine. But at the very beginning of that role, the now CEO pulled me aside and said, Kirk, I'm really a bit confused because we approve all these business cases, and I really don't have any visibility of what happens. Did we achieve the goals? It's not clear to see what the outcomes were. So that obviously was bad news for the organization, but that was music to my ears. The opportunity to establish a benefits practice within the company, and it's really fortunate that we were able to, in the last couple of years there, we were delivering $58 million in quantified tangible benefits on about 22 million of investment. So we were able to get that into a state where it was controlled and reportable, and we really were able to drive some good value in the company. And I really want to share with you just transparently what I learned through that process. We made mistakes. Some things worked. So I'll share you my experience, and obviously mix that in with other research, particularly public sector. I think this relates to public sector, but I have personally less experience in the public sector. So I just wanted to be honest about my experience with you and what worked for me. And I hope to get you some value out of that. We'll also have a little takeaway tool that we'll give you at the end of the presentation. All right, that's me. Let's dive in. Benefits management. So the first question to get this thing started, let's put our minds back to a long time ago. So imagine it's in the Middle Ages. This is a famous story. You're walking along and you see a quarry. And in the quarry, there's a bunch of stonecutters working. And you ask the first stonecutter, what are you doing? And the stonecutter says, I'm earning a living. And you ask the next stonecutter, well, what are you doing? And the stonecutter says, I'm training to be the best stonecutter in the land. And then you ask the third stonecutter, what are you doing? And they say, I'm building a cathedral. So it's the same task, but very different outlook. So my first question for you, you've joined a webinar about benefits management. What is your purpose? So are you interested in benefits management because it's your job? It's totally legitimate. I need to implement it. It's my job. So you're earning a living. Or are you interested in benefits management because it's best practice? We should have a benefits management practice, and I want to understand how to do that. Or it's more about the trade. Or is it that you understand benefits management, it really is the killer app for portfolio management. And it is a method by which you can influence your organization to be its best self. Now, some of you on the call might be in that group, and if you are, this presentation is for you. But if you are one of the other two, we still love you. Please stay on the call. And I hope to encourage you to show you some of the benefits, to encourage you to join us in that last option. All right, why manage benefits? Let's start simple. So picture for a moment in your organization, you now immediately have visibility of all of the outcomes of your projects, the return on investment, whatever that return is for you. What you can do is you can gain a lot of trust in your organization because you show, here's what you invested in, here's what you trusted us with, and here's what we delivered. So it's a great method to get that trust within your organization. It's also a good way to help your organization direct its focus. So, these are the things, when we do these things, we get significant benefit. Here's the return. But when we do these things, we don't get as much. Or maybe we're spread too thin. And a great thing with benefits management is you can direct focus. And we'll talk more about that later. But that's a huge benefit of benefits management. The next one, influence. So we want to influence our companies and our organizations to make better decisions. And through benefits management, you can influence your organization to make better decisions, but you also gain influence personally because you help turn an idea, a strategy, into a tangible outcome that is valuable for your organization. So it helps build your own influence as well in the organization. You must wield this power for good, but you will gain influence. And finally, obviously, all of this will help you achieve results, your organization to achieve results. So that's the goal. That's why we should care, why I think we should care. But it's hard. So let's talk about it. And when we talk about how we might implement it or what worked for me, I think it's helpful to start with first principles. So apologies, let's just start with a couple ABCs and then we get into the fun stuff. So the first question for you, why do we do projects? Why do we do projects? Well, I think to generate value. Right? We create the conditions by which we can then create value. So what's value? Well, I think one definition one will use is it's all the benefits we deliver minus the costs equals the value. And both benefits and costs are realized or incurred over time, as we know. Imagine you buy a new car. So you buy a new car, it costs a bunch of money. Would you say you've achieved all the benefits of owning a car the day you bought the car? No, right? You got to drive the car. That's how you get the benefit of having the car. You drive it around. So we know to get the benefit, it's going to take a while. You have to drive the car for a while. Then you get the return. But the other thing is you pay a lot of money for the car, but then you're not done paying for the car. You have to pay for petrol. You have to pay insurance. You have to pay maintenance. These costs are part of the cost of owning the car that you have to offset against the benefit. Now, some of you on the call might not like me right now because what I am suggesting is you signed up to track benefits, but I would suggest we also need to track costs over time. And by that, what that does, that enables us to then see the impact of what we've implemented. It's the total return on investment. So what are benefits? If we ask best practice, this one's from management of portfolios. It says the measurable improvement resulting from an outcome perceived as an advantage by one or more stakeholders. It's pretty broad. Key element here, it doesn't have to be financial. So it's a positive outcome that we have delivered. That's an advantage. We're going to refine that a little bit more, but that's the high level view. So then if we ask, okay, that's great. That's what a project does. What's the goal of a portfolio? I think one of the core goals of a portfolio is to maximize the strategically aligned value that we deliver through all this activity. So let's talk now. Let's zoom out 1,000 feet. I'm going to say, okay, our portfolio is a value generation machine. What pieces do we need to put in it so that we can deliver that value? Let's build it. This is also my agenda slide. So we'll talk about the agenda here. Number one, what do we need to do? Well, not all benefits are equal, right? If you ran McDonald's, imagine you ran McDonald's and you invest a whole bunch of money in a bunch of projects that will improve the quality of the burgers, right? Now our burgers are 200% better in quality. That's a benefit, but that's probably not going to meet your stakeholders' expectations, right? We don't go to McDonald's for the best quality burger. And now the burger's more expensive. Well, that's not what I wanted. So point is, not all benefits are created equal. We need to know what our goals are so we can make sure our benefits contribute to them. The next thing is we need to foster ideas. So we know the destination. We know what success looks like. How are we going to get there? We need ideas to get there. We need projects. We need ideas for projects. So we want to foster them. And the ones we want to foster have to align to the goals. The next thing we're going to talk about is this one, develop aligned business cases. So we have our goal. We have rough ideas on how we get there. Then we have to put them into business cases. And I think this is probably the most important piece, and we're going to spend the most time today talking about this one. How do we define benefits? How do we structure projects around the goals we need to achieve? Okay, now we got a bunch of ideas. We have these business cases. We got 1,000 business cases. We have to pick which ones we're going to do because we can't do all of them. We need to prioritize and select. This one's not part of the presentation today. I want to talk about it, but we don't have time. So we did one on prioritization not too long ago. Have a look. It'll be on our website. But that's a whole area as well. Hopefully, if you do 1, 2, and 3 right, this one's really easy. And then we get into delivering projects. Well, we have to do the work, right? We have to create the conditions to achieve the benefits. So how do we maximize value during delivery? It's another one we won't have time for today, but that's also important. Then this is a tricky one. We got to realize and track the value now. We made the right plans, but now we have to track us. Are we receiving the benefits that we expected? And then we want to refine and optimize. We have a feedback loop, right? We look at our results, and that will help us make better decisions next time. Make sense? Clear as mud? Those are the key components, I'd say, and that'll be what we'll talk about in the presentation today. How long will it take? Okay, here's my finger in the air. So if you're not doing benefits management currently, I would say give yourself maybe 2 to 3 years from 0 to hero. The reason why it takes a while is because you have to track enough benefits in a consistent way that you can start to drive influence on the other end. And you can start to, you can start to influence your key executive stakeholders. You can now say, look, guess what? Every time you give us $1, we give you $3 back. Here's specifically where. You can even sit down with the CFO and say, let's talk P&Ls. Here's where we're providing value. So then now you have this incredible influence that you can use to make this machine really sing. So give yourself a little bit of time. It does take a little while. All right, defining the goals. Step one, setting goals for your portfolio. In Altus, we call them strategic goals. But the idea is we need to know what success looks like. Here's some examples. Our portfolio needs to increase profit margin by 3% by some year. Or we want to enter a new market and achieve a revenue in that market. Or we want to meet our carbon neutral goal. Point of these, obviously, they're all very specific and measurable. Don't worry if you don't have them. We're going to talk about that next. But they are very helpful. I suggest putting some in place. So the first thing is, ideally, these are going to be set or endorsed by executive management. If you don't have them, I know how you feel. I didn't either. But these will help you. Specific with measurable targets. They can be aspirational, in my opinion. I think it's better to set a target that's too optimistic so that you really push everyone to try and achieve it rather than be too conservative. So this is to set direction. It helps us set direction. It helps us focus. That's the key goal. And then the thing is, these are goals, not themes. Your organization might say, you know what? We want to have a great customer experience. That's really important for us. And we want all our staff to be, I think this is the best job ever. And we want our products to be the best possible quality. We might have to tell our stakeholders that. We might have to tell the market that, but those aren't goals, right? Those are just high-level themes. We need goals. So what if you don't have goals? What if your executive hasn't given you that? That's okay. This is an opportunity to demonstrate your strategic leadership. you can really make a difference here. So what I'd suggest, here's some things that helped me. Think big, draft your own, share it with your executive, invite their feedback, Hey, I drafted these because I think these are probably the goals for our portfolio, but it's just a draft. So keen for your guidance, right? They might love you for it. Hey, you did our work for us. How do you do it though? Well, there's the obvious things, understand your own company strategy, review whatever you can about it. Look at what your competitors, vendors, and customers are doing. So just get a sense of what's happening. That's helpful. If it's a publicly traded company, or if you're not for profit or you have access to this type of information, read the annual reports. One thing I found really helpful is to analyze the financial statements. So take a look at your core financial statements over a period of a few years. What you can do too is horizontal or vertical analysis to see trends. Super helpful. One thing I found at a previous organization is our profit margins were declining. So that was clear in the income statement over a period of years. Our suppliers were pushing us for more and more. Our margins were decreasing. So we needed to address that in our portfolio. This kind of stuff, you can see it in the financial reports. If you don't have, corporate finance background, it's worth upskilling. I think if you're a portfolio manager or a BA, can be a really helpful tool for you. Here's a fun one. Ask ChatGPT. So you can say, do a PESTLE analysis on whatever industry you're in Australia, or do a Porter's 5 Forces analysis on your industry in Australia. So just classic business school stuff. These are really good for industry analysis. It'll give you probably some interesting insights. Give it a try. Another thing you can do is say to ChatGPT, give me 5 threats or opportunities to my organization, and see what it says. It's all just helping you get ideas. Another one is, if you really think, what are the 3 levers that most impact my organization's results? Can you figure out what those are? There's also a marketing guru on YouTube. His name is Alex Hormozi, and he's got an interesting one about, understand what business you're really in. Suppose you have a construction business, you're a builder, right? And you might think, well, I'm in the building industry. That's what I do. I do building. But your business actually depends on you attracting qualified tradespeople. That's actually your business. The most important thing you need to do is find the best tradespeople and get them under your umbrella. So understand what business you're really in. A few thoughts for you. When you put it together, let's say you've got now your top 5 or top 7. Don't make too many. If you have too many, then you end up being split too thin. You can have more impact if you focus, if it's possible. Fostering ideas. This is the next step. We have our goals. Now let's foster ideas. Don't worry, this step is really simple if you're just starting out. First thing I'd say is just align everything you already have to the goals you just came up with. So any existing ideas, proposals, projects, figure out where they fit compared to the goals you just came up with. It'll be really illuminating. That's all you have to do. If you're just starting out, just do that and move on to the next step. If you've done this for a while, then what I suggest is encourage your organization to submit ideas that align to those goals. It's good if your executive says, look, hey, we're just being transparent. Here's what we have to focus on for this portfolio. We need your ideas. And the subtext here is, if you submit ideas, Mr. GM, Mrs. GM, that aren't aligned to those goals, we're probably not going to approve them. This will really help your organization focus their thinking into what you have to achieve. It can be really powerful. All right, grab a screenshot of this if you like it. This was really helpful for me. So what you can now do, you've just made up the goals. You put the projects and ideas into this framework. Pick a few years, say 3 years, and put the projects into this Gantt against each goal. So you've got, we need to increase our recurring revenue, goal 1. These projects mostly are contributing to that. How are we doing? Well, we're probably going to achieve our goal. Here's some commentary, right? You can do it for each one of your goals. This is gold if you give it to the executive, because it gives them a roadmap, right? Here's where here's how we're doing, and here's where we have problems. You can see the second goal. We don't have any projects in FY26 and FY27. That's a problem. We need ideas, or we're not going to hit this goal. So again, helps your organization focus. It also, one of the questions that someone wrote in, which was awesome, is, how do I help my executive understand the value of benefits? Well, if you can give them something like this, you're giving them value right away. You're not trying to sell them, hey, benefits management's really important and it does X, Y, and Z. Instead, say, hey, I just put this together for you. It shows us how we're traveling to what I think the goals are, my understanding. What do you think? They can take it away. It can be their idea. That's fine. The point is, it helps move you in the right direction. And now we come to maybe the biggest part of this presentation, which is developing aligned business cases. We got our ideas of potential projects, and now we need to actually plan out what the scope of those projects is going to be and how we're going to justify them. So I think it's the most important step. Business cases, in my opinion, should offer a tactical solution whose purpose it is to contribute towards your strategic goals. So if we have those goals we talked about earlier, sometimes people are going to suggest projects that just fit right in. It's great. So they might have some ideas that just exactly slot into those, and it's easy to sell them. But that's not always going to be the case. I found a lot of the times GMs were just suggesting things that were really relevant in their space, but didn't really align to what the organization needed to do on the surface. And when that's the case, like this one, implement AI agent for more productive meetings. Could be really valuable. Does it increase our profit margin? I don't know. Does it help us enter a new market? Maybe. So it's one thing where then you really have to spend a lot of effort to try and figure out, how does this support our goals? How do we structure it so that it does support our goals? You're often going to have to change the scope, but then you can really focus on them to achieve the goals. Let me give you a suggestion. This was really helpful for me because GMs would come to me all the time with ideas they had, but they suffered from something that we all suffer from, solutionitis, right? We get obsessed with an idea, a solution, but we actually don't know what problem we're solving. So someone hawks us their product, we think it's awesome, I need that product. But why? What solution are you trying to solve? So if a GM comes to you with an idea, and it's just more a solution they really like, but they don't know why they need it, the good thing to ask is this. Imagine we just implemented your project. It was implemented perfectly. We achieved everything you wanted. Describe how your business is different. And what you might hear is, well, it's mostly the same. Well, that's interesting. So how are we going to get the executive to approve your project when it doesn't impact the business? It's good food for thought, and I think it encourages the right type of thinking. So just a tip that I found helpful. Now, how do we define benefits? Let's get into the meat and potatoes. What's a benefit? We talked about the definition, but here's some categories I think are helpful. When we think about benefits, they might be tangible or intangible. Tangible, they're measurable. Intangible could be like, how customers feel about our product. It's kind of intangible. We can't really measure it. They might also be financial or non-financial. So revenue, or maybe customer satisfaction rating, non-financial. Or they could be related to ESG, which I think is its own category in its own right. So environmental, social governance. So doing good things to help our society and our world, right? This might get contentious. Again, this is just my opinion. I think tangible benefits are more influential than intangible. They're easier to understand. They're more impactful when you talk to people about them. It's just intangible is kind of hard to measure. Well, by definition, it is. And then financial tends to, in some organizations, especially private sector, is more influential than if it's non-financial. So let's talk about how we strengthen a benefit. If we start with something like improve customer satisfaction, okay, it's intangible and it's non-financial, but we want to do it. So I'd say that's probably not the strongest benefit if we just said we want to improve customer satisfaction. How do we make it better? Well, here's the obvious thing. We say we're going to improve our customer satisfaction survey score by 5%. Great. We just made it tangible. We can measure it. Awesome. It's better. But I think we can do better. So the key question here, why do we care about customer satisfaction? What does it impact? So let's talk about that. If we have a high customer satisfaction, we retain customers. Customers buy more stuff from us. Customers refer us to their friends and their other organizations that they interact with. And we have fewer product returns. There's just a few examples. Okay, let's break those ones down. Oops. So here's some what I think are much better benefits. Okay, so we say we're going to increase contract renewal rate by 5%, which will result in a 5% additional revenue. That's our new benefit. We might say we're going to improve customer satisfaction, and we're going to measure it by increasing our contract renewal rate by 5%, which will result in $5 million of revenue, right? And there's a few other examples here. I'll talk to the one at the very bottom. So fewer product returns. We might say, well, we're going to reduce product returns by 5%, which results in a reduction in our CO2 emission because we don't have to drive things around. So that's an ESG benefit. I think these benefits are way stronger. So my suggestion here, don't be lazy. So many people that I talk to building business cases would say, oh, we can't really measure that. You know, oh, we can't really measure the customer satisfaction we can drive or with productivity savings. We can't really measure it. It's sort of intangible. I'd say that might be true, but really exhaust everything you can to confirm that that's the case before you accept it. Try not to be lazy. The other thing is target what's important, right? Write benefits that align to your goals. Don't just write a whole bunch of other benefits. And then under promise and over deliver is generally good. You know, think sales here, right? So pick benefits that you feel are quite achievable, but are strong enough to still justify the project comfortably. Some stakeholders might encourage you to go really top end. You know, we're going to make a bajillion dollars. Well, the thing is, we're going to have to report on that. And we might not make a bajillion dollars, then it looks like a failure, even though we made half a bajillion dollars. So anyway, you get the point. If you can, under promise, over deliver, but be realistic. There's some ideas on how to strengthen your benefits. Now, a couple more thoughts. First thing, benefits can be a bit complicated for many of our stakeholders to understand. One reason for that is because we're comparing two things. We're comparing what happened when we did the project, bright sunny meadow, beautiful day, right, to what the world would have been like if we didn't do it. It's a hypothetical, imaginary future that didn't happen or won't happen. So as an example, if we do the project, we might earn $500,000 in revenue. If we don't do the project, we're going to lose $1 million. What this means is the delta is 1.5 million. Our benefit is $1.5 million. It's not 500K. But this can be confusing because then your stakeholder will say, my P&L didn't go up by 1.5 million. Correct, it didn't. It went up by 500K. But your benefit to the organization is 1.5 because you would have gone down. So that just something you might need to remind stakeholders. It does make it a little bit harder to understand, a little less intuitive. This was a question that came through the submission when you joined, and I thought this was really good. How long should I measure benefits and cost for? There's no easy answer. I'd say you can potentially standardize it based on your project type. So, you know, if it's an IT project, you're putting in a new ERP system or something, then I'd say, you know, maybe 5 years. Pick something reasonable that if it's too short, your costs might be too high and you're underselling the benefit. If it's too long, you're probably putting too many more benefits in than are realistic because we can't see the future that far ahead for many things, IT projects in particular. If you're building a physical asset that's going to provide value for 20 years and you're quite confident, maybe you go with a longer time period. What I found helpful is that we just standardized. So these types of projects, we always measure for this period of time, just to make it easy. And err on the side of a shorter term, just because unless you have crystal ball, it gets really hard. It's going to be 10 years down the line. You'll have left that job for some new fancy job. The person coming in won't even remember. It just gets a little bit tricky. And the other thing is obviously you want to track benefits and costs for the same time period. So don't track costs for only 2 years, but benefits for 5 years. That's not fair, or vice versa. Productivity, a note on productivity. How many business cases I got handed were ideas that said, we're going to save X hours. We're going to save 1,000 hours. We're going to save 1,000,000 hours. The problem is that's not really a benefit. It's just an interesting fact, you know? There are limited conditions where that is a benefit. So for example, we're going to save 1,000 hours of consultant effort that we can immediately turn off for a cost savings. Sure. But 1,000 hours, what are you going to do? You know, are you going to make somebody redundant? Hopefully not. But then you have a cost savings. So that's the benefit, not the productivity. Maybe you can give people a long lunch break, which is great. It retains employees. Employees are happy. Perfect. Your benefit is around employee retention and reducing the cost of hiring people. Maybe it's with that 5,000 hours, we're going to introduce a new product. We have enough time, we have enough headcount to now introduce a new product. Your benefit is the revenue you earn from that product. So you have to follow the bouncing ball a little bit more to figure out where the benefit is. Just a thought on productivity. Risk reduction, let's talk about this one. So how much value will be delivered? So with risk reduction, we think about the baseline risk. If we don't do the project, what's the risk? And then we compare it to if we do the project, what's the risk, right? It's pretty straightforward. We can convert it into dollars if it makes sense. And here's how I might do that. So we take the likelihood and the consequence and we multiply them together. So if we don't do anything, we've got a 50% chance of losing $5 million. That's not great. So half times 5 million is our exposure is 2.5 million. Not great. If we do the project, then we have a 20% chance of losing $500,000. So for $100,000, that's way better. So what's the benefit of our project? We look at the delta, and we can have a $2.4 million benefit. Now that's over time though, so you can spread it out over multiple years. If we have a 50% chance of something happening, that means it's probably going to happen once every 2 years. Oof, this company's in trouble, right? It's going to happen once every 2 years. So I would spread that benefit over 2 years. Just a thought on risk reduction. Now I'm kind of excited about this one. Sometimes you have a light bulb moment. This was a light bulb moment for me, I think anyway. I want to give you something. And it is what we've called the benefits navigator. This helps connect strategies, even project ideas, with tangible benefits, because this part's really hard. So let me show you how it works. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. We're going to send it out at the end, so you'll receive a copy of it. And there's some instructions on the first tab, but I'm just going to explain how this works. There's 2 axes. So along the rows, we have different things, different strategic things or tactical things that you can do. So for growth and expansion, for example, or generating revenue, we have customer and market focus, information and digital transformation and technology. There's a whole bunch of them down the side. And then each one of these is a thing that you might want to do. We might have projects that are set up to do these things. And across the top, you have ideas on how this could impact revenue, cost, risk, environmental, your impact on the environment, your impact on the social network, and your impact on governance. You can do this 2 ways. So if I have, let's say I want to, it doesn't matter, improve customer satisfaction. So we want to improve customer satisfaction. How are we going to measure that? Well, from a revenue standpoint, maybe what we can do is increase revenue by enhancing our customer interactions, which increases our customer lifetime value, which we can put a financial dollar against. Or maybe it helps us reduce cost by retaining our customers, which decreases our churn rate, which we can measure as a cost to acquire customers. There's also a risk around lost revenue, which we can address. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of things in this sheet that you can use, and I hope it helps you as a brainstorming aid. The other thing you can do is go the other direction. So maybe we want to increase revenue. What are our options to increase revenue? Well, here's a whole bunch of ideas and how they will impact your revenue, how they could impact your revenue. So you can go shopping either way. Maybe there's a risk we want to reduce. We've got whatever happens to be price sensitivity resulting in reduced profit margin. We're concerned about that. What can we do? We can improve our pricing strategy. If we improve our pricing strategy, how can that impact our revenue or our cost? How can it help us, improve environmental metrics? So that's this tool. I hope you get some value from it. It's just as an initial brainstorming aid, because I know this area is particularly hard. All right, back to the Prezzo. Considerations, a couple more considerations. First thing is, benefits and costs are expensive to track, right? It's a lot of work involved. So be careful about how many you track. 80-20 rule. most of your benefits are going to come from the top benefits. Like the value is going to come from the top. And I know we can brainstorm 6,000 benefits for a project, but most of those are not going to be, they're going to be inconsequential. So we really want to pick the top 1 to 3, pick however many you need to justify the project, and the strongest ones. You really only need one really big, strong one to hang a whole project on. So one thing to consider here, imagine you track benefits for 5 years, and you track 3 benefits per project. If you track benefits for 5 years, that means in any year, you are tracking 5 years worth of projects, right? Because they line up on top of each other, because you have to do it over time. So it's good to just really focus on the top ones. It doesn't mean the others aren't important. Include them as commentary. They can be commentary in your business case. Hey, we're going to also do these great things, these other things, but we're not going to measure them because we justify the investment. But just bear in mind, here's all the other things. And you can even put those in a register so you can flash them up later when you have to update shareholders. For example, the annual general meeting. Here's all the other things we did. Another thing I found was helpful was just to track objectives. So for example, one thing we had to do was implement a new ERP system. So you can say, hey, we did that too. We implemented a new ERP. That's not the benefit, but it's a thing we did. So you can say, here's all the things we did. So yeah, keep it a small list of benefits if you can, because there will be thousands quickly. A couple tips and tricks. We're almost to the end of this section, then we'll talk about tracking, and then we'll have Q&A. So we're almost there. Thanks, everybody. I know there's a lot of content here. This one's a bit of a fun one. So here's the thing. Be aware, we're all humans. We have fallacies and biases, and these can be used to our advantage. Again, we're going to use these powers for good, not evil. But here's a few things that help us in portfolio land when it comes to benefits and business cases. Here's a few fallacies that we all suffer from. I'm just going to bring up the next thing, which is how we can use it to our advantage. So the first thing is sunk cost fallacy. People are hesitant to abandon things they've already invested in. So if you have a big opportunity project, but it's really expensive, it can be helpful if you do just a little thing first. Just do a proof of concept. We're just going to request a proof of concept. Once that's done, we're just going to do now an MVP. And then we're just going to do the next stage. And eventually you've done the big project. But because the business starts to invest, it's really hard to stop investing. If you know this is the right thing for the business, you can use this fallacy to your advantage. Loss aversion is another one. So generally, people and businesses are more sensitive to the thought of losing something as opposed to getting something. So we're at risk of losing $5 million in revenue. We're at risk of losing this market segment. We need to do something. Is usually more influential than, hey, maybe we could earn another 5 million. Illusion of control. So we overestimate our ability to control the future. One thing you can do is reinforce past successes. So, before you position the new idea, hey, here's a whole bunch of ideas we did. Here's our benefits that we achieved, which we can measure now. And here's the new idea. So you give yourself credibility. Preference for completion. So we all want to get that, that progress bar. We want to get it to 100. We all do. So what you can do when you have a new initiative, you can position it as part of a roadmap to achieve that goal that we talked about. You say, we just need to do phase 1, then we have phase 2, phase 3. It's all part of the roadmap. And then when you go back to ask for phase 2, you've already you've positioned it. We want to get 100%. So it helps you to roll into the next stage. The next one is true. This one can catch us out. This is one we need to be conscious of in portfolio land. The availability heuristic. We all tend to be more conscious of information that's easier for us to have access to. So, if there's been a whole bunch of plane crashes recently, we're all worried that, it seems really risky to fly on a plane. But it's just, you happen to be more aware of, the information. It's not that the risk has changed. So what I've observed is that people tend to focus on things when they submit ideas to you that the organization is already good at. If your organization is really efficient and productive, you're going to get a raft of business cases about how to be more efficient or productive, because it's what we talk about and think about. But the problem is you're squeezing blood from a stone now. You're already good at that. There's a huge gap over there that no one can see. So try and find those gaps. That's where the real value is. You're going to have a huge impact if you focus on those. The other thing I've found is that people tend to focus more on internal matters to your organization at the exclusion of external, like what our customers are doing or what the market is doing. We're like, internally we have to get more productive, or we have to fix this thing in our business. But we're missing that our customers are changing. We're missing something external. So just be conscious that people will be more familiar with that, so you'll get more ideas that address internal matters when external matters might be more important. All right, that's the end of that section. And sorry, we will have a Q&A soon. The next one is tracking value. Now, what have we done? We defined our goals. We have all of our ideas, proposals, everything is now aligned to our goals. We've got business cases that are aligned, that are flowing through the portfolio. We want to realize and track value so we can see what's happening at the end of this. Moment of truth. You will have thousands of data points to manage. This is where often it becomes too hard, I think. We don't know how to deal with that. It's hard, but there's tricks. So delegation, in my opinion, what worked for me, delegation of benefits reviews is essential. And automation is recommended to help trigger those benefits reviews. I'll tell you more what I mean. And before we get there, here's a question for you. Who is accountable for realizing a benefit? I've heard some really interesting answers to this question. Can I tell you my least favorite answer to this question? The project manager. The project manager is accountable. The project manager can't be accountable. The project manager doesn't receive the benefit, and the project manager probably doesn't have functional authority over the people who need to change their behavior in order to achieve the benefit. So I think senior user is a great answer. It could be senior user. What I put in this presentation is that the senior manager could be a user who receives the benefit, right? Senior user is good from a Prince 2 terminology standpoint. So this needs to be a senior person in the organization. Maybe their P&L is directly impacted by this project. They have the incentive to care. What worked for me was to basically position the business case as a contract. It's a contract between the recipient of the benefit owner, and the executive or the people who fund it. If you give me this money, I will be accountable for the benefit. So what we need to do is we can help this person, right? When we write the business case, we want to make sure it's conservative. We need to make sure we identify assumptions and dependencies, and we work with this person, incorporate their feedback, and make sure they're really comfy. You know, yes, I'm confident this is the right benefit. I'm confident we can, if this project is delivered, we'll get it. And I'm willing to take the steps I have to take to drive the change in my business unit. So if you can, it's got to be the senior manager or senior user. Program, portfolio, project managers, we can't be accountable. But we provide a supporting administrative function. We'll make sure that all the doing happens. We move things around, but we're not accountable for that outcome. We can't be. Costs, very similar question. Who's accountable for the ongoing costs after the project's done? So we've delivered the project. Maybe we built a new product or business unit, and we have to hire a whole bunch of people. Well, that cost is a part of the benefits realization for the project, but who's accountable? Well, it's probably the P&L owner, right? But the benefit owner, yeah, senior responsible owner or sponsor, great. Man, you're my people. Great work, team. Yeah, so the senior responsible owner, benefit owner needs to work together with the person who owns the P&L that has to pay the costs. They're not off the hook either. They're not off the hook either. They can't just say, "Oh, we had to hire 50 people unexpectedly," right? They really do need to be working in concert with the benefit owner to make sure that we're being efficient and we're minimizing costs and we're making smart decisions. But the cost owner should estimate and approve the costs in the business case that's going to impact their P&L. They have to agree that what we forecast is correct. And then there's a budgeting conversation, right? But presumably, if the executive approved the business case, they've approved that P&L owner to increase their budget to cover the costs that are being driven out of the business case. Right? Again, in our role, we support it from an administrative standpoint, but we don't own the cost. So how do we define a benefit? And here I've added one more person. So how we define a benefit, we've got, here's the project, here's a description of what the benefit is, here's the owner, Ms. General Manager of Sales. Measurement owner is a new one that I've added here. So the idea, this is the benefit owner is usually a senior person in the business. They might not be like a guru on reporting in this specific area. So they might say, oh, John on my team, they're going to give you the numbers. So it's helpful to know who knows how to get the numbers. The benefit owner, you still go, hey, benefit owner, we need you to give us an update, but they can tell the measurement owner to do it. How often are we going to measure it? I'll talk about that in a second. What unit are we going to measure it? So is it dollars, for example? How did we calculate it? Seriously, capture this at the business case stage because you'll forget. Next year, 2 years, 3 years from now, oh, how did we get that number? We've got to write this down. It will help the benefit owner understand what we did, how we measured it. And you might find a flaw later in what you calculated. That's okay. Remember that the goal here really is to help the business make better decisions. So if we made a mistake, well, we learned something, but also maybe now the new calculation better represents the actual benefit being delivered. Obviously, we go through all the right governance to change it. But the point is, we have to know what the calculation was. We have to know what our assumptions were. It's helpful if we can say what P&L is impacted, and then we have a bit of a forecast. This looks familiar to anyone in project land, right? We have a baseline. Don't do the project, we don't get any revenue. Our target is to earn this much revenue. Our forecast is this. Our actuals were that. As we measure them, costs are really similar. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but it's good to consider things like remuneration will increase by CPI if it's a staff cost as part of your costs, all of that good stuff. All right, last couple slides. How do we measure it? So the first thing we need to do is notify our owners. It's time to measure the benefit, right? While the project's running, this can be slightly different because sometimes you can realize benefits during the project, but once it's done, the way I always worked it is we closed the project. So we delivered all the scope, project's done. We've now created the conditions for the benefits to be realized. Project manager moves on. Now it's handed to the PMO. The PMO now does the admin function that's on this screen. They oversee it. So the first thing is we need to notify the owners at some reasonable cadence. Okay, I always went with annual. Benefits tracking is super resource intensive. So if you can do it more often, that's great. But for us, we did it annually. There's more accuracy and agility if it's more frequent, but it's more costly. So you'll figure out what's right in your business. You might split all your benefits, and in each quarter you do a certain set of the benefits, right? So by the end of the year, you've done all of them. It's really up to you, but I'd set this as something that's achievable. Then I go and request from all our benefits owners, hey, by the way, next month, we need to know an updated calculation for this. This is what you said. Here's what we need. I'll show you an example of that email in a second. If you can automate sending that out, that's great because you might have to send 100 or 200 of them. Then I sent an update. Hey, now that it's now time, I gave you a warning. It's now time. Can you tell me what your updated figure is? If they don't respond, I might go back to them and say, hey, look, you haven't responded. Do you have any questions? If they still don't respond, then the assumption is, which I document, is that if you don't work with us, then we'll assume our forecast was correct, right? And that they answer to the executive about that, but we'll report that the forecast was correct. Your mileage may vary. Capture and review. We want to capture all this information in a central location. In Altus, for example, if you use Altus in one central spreadsheet or system, we want to look for lessons. So now this data is gold, right? Which projects had a higher return on investment? Which ones had lower? Why? Which projects achieved their target benefits? Which ones overachieved? Which ones underachieved? Why? And we can put that information back into the system so we make better decisions next time, which is our whole goal. And then we should highlight and celebrate what was achieved. Scream it from the top of the mountain. Hey, your effort within the PMO made $200 million for the organization. You achieved these great outcomes. You did that work. Helps get your staff excited. And when you talk to the executive, here's what was accomplished. We ask for your trust next year. Let's do better next year. It's really powerful. So here's an example of that email. We give that information that I talked about. Here's what you said in the business case. Here's what we agreed. Here's how we measured it. Here's the assumptions. We're going to reach out to you soon. Be prepared. We send out another one. Give us the number. You get the idea. So that's it. That's the presentation today. Here's each one of the areas we talked about with just some key points. Right, and we can send this out to you afterwards. I hope that's been valuable for you. It was a real journey that we went on. And what we're going to do, yeah, give us some thoughts. Thanks, Ellie, on how you found this. Reach out to us. We're keen to work with you if you have questions about your organization and workshop it. And we'll send that little tool out afterwards. So next step, Q&A. We'll just open the floor. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can put your hand up and talk, whatever you prefer. If anyone fell asleep, I'm sorry. I hope it was helpful. Let me post up a few. I don't want to discourage you. Please post if you have any questions, but I'll show you a few that were written in that I thought were really good. So one question was, when is a benefit technically realized? Is it when it's 70%, 80%? Do we wait till 100%? How long do we keep a project open? So I'd say we define in the business case what's required for the benefit to be fully realized. And it's more around the period of time, right? So for us to get the return on investment, we need to measure it for 5 years. After 5 years, we know what the outcome was. How long do we keep a project open? You can keep the project open until the benefit's fully realized. Could be a few years. Recommend potentially taking the PM off so they can focus on what they do best, and then the PMO steps in. But I would say, yeah, keep benefits tracking until you've hit that point at the business case where it's done, where you stop tracking. You might be still achieving benefits. Hopefully you still do for many years after that. But tracking them for too long gets too costly. So we say, hey, maybe we achieved way more than we expected, but that's okay. I'm going to answer a couple questions in the chat. I've heard the term disbenefit. Yeah, that's a good one. So a disbenefit, it's a bit like cost. So a benefit obviously is a positive outcome that's occurred as a result of the project. A disbenefit is a negative outcome that we've accepted as part of the project. So it could be that a disbenefit, let's say we're going to put in a new ERP system. Sorry, this example just is on my mind at the moment. We put in a new ERP system. What's the benefit? Hey, we're more productive, and we measure that in this way. We removed a cybersecurity risk because our old one was legacy system, super risky. But the change, our people will be impacted by the change, right? We might lose some good people. There's a disbenefit. So it's something that will probably occur as a result of it, but it's not positive. That's how I would define it anyway. Define a benefits realization. We define a benefits realization being not met, partially met, or fully met. Yeah, that's really good. So we might say, here's our target. If we underperformed to the target, then we might say it's not fully realized, or maybe it was fully realized. That you could use that definition as well. We've got, yeah, I'd like to see a detailed session on how to structure this information sensibly to enable full multi-scale reporting in Altus PPM. Great question. We'll take that offline and see if we can put something together for you. That's a great idea. We've got, yeah, actually a couple have mentioned that. So we'll definitely take that on board. Thanks again. If you haven't received the majority in the first 3 years, are you then potentially costing you more by trying to track the benefits? Yeah, good question. So in this scenario, we've created our business cases effectively. We've got good goals. I guess there's different scenarios here. One scenario is that, did we set our sights too low so that when we've achieved the benefits, they're just not strong enough for us to make an impact? That's probably an error that we've made at the start of the process. If, let's say, the projects we run are super long, we build assets and we can't realize benefits for 20 years. We can't fully realize the benefits for 20 years. That's hard. What we can show is trending. So how on track are we over this initial period? We can still use our forecasting. I still think the forecasting is valuable. So it's too early for us to give you full realized 100% numbers, but we can still show you how we're trending. So that can still be valuable. There's other things you can talk to as well, right? I think there's real value in positioning that conversation with your executive or whoever your portfolio is directed by, to say, here are the things that guide us. Here's everything we're doing that's along those lines. We are focused on achieving objectives. Here's what we're tracking. I still think that's valuable, even if you don't have all of the benefits numbers yet. I hope that helps answer the question. One of our major issues is to measure benefits of projects we do to benefit third parties when they are not mature enough to measure their improvement. We have to go for customer feedback, although we'd like to identify more tangible measures. There's probably no easy answer to that question. I like it. It's a tough one. So one potential option, if you've got, and I'll need your guidance on this, but if you've got an opportunity early on in the piece to sit down with that third party and say, it is helpful for us to understand what outcomes this needs to drive in your organization and agree on success measures. And before we start any work, can we agree on how we'll measure them in a way that's realistic for you, right? So, emergency services is an example that you've given. So can emergency services, what can they measure? Can we come up with some success criteria? And then can we meet on some cadence just to see how do we track based on what we agreed? And we need their guidance on what is achievable for them. So it's difficult, but I hope that helps answer that. And I'd be keen to put a little bit more thought into that question. That's a great question. All right. So a couple more on this page. Again, please feel free to post more in the chat. Or if you didn't like my answer, post a follow-up question. A couple things that we had on here. Way to start simple and scale. Yeah, I'd say set those goals. Just create some goals. Start to align everything you're already doing to them. Just start there. How do you best approach capability uplift in senior decision makers? This is really tough. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I think if you can give them value in every interaction, you give them a piece of information that makes them think, that's really helpful. I remember I had a session with a group of executives around setting a portfolio, and I told them all the best practice and just said, we've heard it all before. Shut it right down. So I think it's helpful if you can go and help them think about the situation in a new way, give them some piece of information that's interesting, like where we talked about that mapping of goals to projects. So start them thinking, and then they'll hopefully come to the conclusion themselves, oh, wow, this actually would be really helpful if we had the benefits metrics, and seeing what you can do without extra investment, because I know it's challenging to set up a benefits practice, but it's really hard to win extra resources to help build a benefits practice until you can show value. Chicken and the egg. So I guess if you can set your goals, something that's achievable with resources you actually have, that can be helpful. There's an interesting one at the bottom here. Ryan's on the call. Ryan should probably take this, but I'm going to take it anyway. You can correct me where I'm wrong, Ryan. What are the emerging practices in defining and proactively measuring portfolio value, including use of AI-driven prioritization? AI is changing our world, isn't it? So here's my opinion. We're now playing crystal ball, but when you look at the things on the top of the screen here, I feel like there's a part that AI can play in every single one. But I don't know if the process radically changes. It could be that it's more constant and iterative as opposed to like every financial year we create a portfolio, every financial year we review our goals. It might be that we can do it much faster because of the benefit of AI. But we can use AI right now to help define goals. And then how do we align things? Well, maybe we can use AI to process ideas and suggest how we align them best to goals. Maybe we can use AI to help us craft business cases. Maybe we can use AI to help us prioritize. How can we use AI to help us identify benefits, possibilities we didn't even think of while we're delivering projects? A big one here, I think, for AI is around risk. We're running a project. How do we identify risks that could jeopardize achievement of benefits? That's a big one. So that's such a huge question and an interesting one and an evolving one. So maybe we'll give that to Ryan. Potentially he can run a workshop on that. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. Really appreciate it. Love your questions. I hope you got some value out of this. I'll hand over to Ellie to close us out.
Perfect. Thanks heaps, Kirk, for that. So as mentioned before, you will get the webinar recording and the presentation slides and the benefit navigator after this shortly. We also have another webinar coming up on June 25th. You will have the link available. Otherwise, I'll send it to you as well. So thank you again, Kirk, and we hope everyone has a lovely rest of the day. So I'll stop the recording now. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.